When you've heard the news this afternoon, a couple hours ago, what did you think?
Well, I think rulings like this, and I think we've seen from the FDA and also from activity in Congress that some of these rulings, I think we've been preparing and anticipating for there being these egregious overreaches by members of the judiciary appointed by a right-wing Republican Party whose goal for a very long time was to just pack these courts with partisan judges, often underqualified or completely unqualified for their role. And so there has been thought, I believe, given to this. Senator Ron Wyden has already issued statements, for example, advising what we should do in a situation like this, which I concur, which is that I believe that the Biden administration should ignore this ruling. I think that the courts have the legitimacy and they rely on the legitimacy of their rulings. And what they are currently doing is engaged in an unprecedented and dramatic erosion of the legitimacy of the courts. It is the justices themselves, through the deeply partisan and unfounded nature of these rulings, that are undermining their own enforcement.
So you're saying the Biden administration should ignore this court, but what does that look like? What does that actually mean?
The interesting thing when it comes to a ruling is that it relies on enforcement. And it is up to the Biden administration to choose whether or not to enforce such a ruling.
But do we want to live in a world where a government can decide to ignore a federal court ruling?
Well, no, of course. I mean,
No, the question really is do we want to let one judge in some district in Texas or Tennessee or wherever make a decision, a biased decision, that the rest of us in the country all have to abide by? Do we want to live in a world where that's possible? No, that's the question.
On the other hand, what we are also seeing is a power grab over our courts in which the laws passed by Congress and the rules and policies passed by the executive branch now are going to require unanimous consent from 650 district court judges, many of which are appointed with even, the American Bar Association saying that they're completely unfit for the role.
It is one of the things sort of that a lot of people didn't pay that much attention to during the Trump administration because there were so many bizarre things going on every day. But Mitch McConnell was, getting judges appointed to the bench who were the most conservative judges possible.
And they weren't just conservative, they were completely unqualified. And Republicans knowingly put these folks on the bench because the between nominations with the Federalist Society and other organizations knew that they would get outcomes like these. And this is an effort to really subvert the will of the American people who elect their legislators and who elect their leaders to enact the policies that they are accountable to.
I understand, people having differences of opinions on matters like this, religious differences, whatever it may be. What's interesting to me at this judge, though, the arguments he's making, we just spoke to that physician, the arguments he's making about the medical concerns just do not stand up to the facts.
And that is exactly what makes this ruling different. This is not about a case where a judge is calling balls and strikes on what is within the bounds of the law and not. Mifepristone has been legal and in the market for 23 years.
And it's not as if there's some new study that has come out and said, oh my gosh, this is actually...
This is like someone coming out and a judge just coming out and outlining Claritin or aspirin or Plan B because they felt like it. I mean, the contents of this judge's ruling is frankly shocking, and it should be appalling to anyone who practices law because it is so unfounded. It is insulting, I believe, to any profession in the law because it is pure conjecture. There is no medical evidence. There is no new study. This is a ruling that happened because they could and because they wanted to.
So when you see Vice President Harris saying, we're going to do everything we can to stand, to stop this, to stand with women.
There is no question that the president and I are going to stand with the women of America and do everything we can to ensure that women have the ability to make decisions about their health care, their reproductive health care, in a manner that is what they need, and they decide that, not their government.
You're saying that they should just ignore this judge?
Yes, she already said that. Yes, dude.
3 legislators who took part in a protest on the floor of the State House, not with protesters, but out on the actual floor. They had a bullhorn, clearly a violation of the rules of decorum. Not something legislators normally do or would, make sense to have legislators do for good order of actually hearing people's arguments. That being said, the punishment for 2 of them was to be expelled. How do you see that? Do you think that really was about the rules of decorum or something else?
We know that it absolutely was not. We know that, and there is precedent for this. While protest is not a normal occurrence on the House floor, it happens all the time. We saw John Lewis lead a sit-in on the floor of the United States Congress. Unseeming behavior from House Republicans, even during the State of the Union, yelling and hooting and hollering. From the National Republican Party during the President's State of the Union. Were these people expelled? Was there even an ethics, question brought up to this? No, there was not.
There was a shush.
There was a shush, right. So what we're also seeing here, and there are so many levels before expulsion, naturally. There's even censure. There is striking the word.
What was it about?
Pardon?
What was it about?
I think this is about the fascist takeover of our state houses that Republicans have invested in the last several decades. This is about a naked abuse of power. This is about disenfranchising. Democrats in states where there is extreme levels of voter suppression, and it was also about racism. It was deeply about racism. From the comments, the absolutely disrespectful and denigrating comments made to the Black members of the Tennessee House, to the fact that these Republicans voted to expel. After charging three of these members, they expelled 2 Black male legislators, and they voted to acquit in a way, or they voted to not expel the sole white woman, Representative Gloria Johnson, who has been a phenomenal ally.
Who herself raised this issue of race playing a role.
Yes, and they have no defense. There is no defense, and we have not heard any rational explanation for why that is.
There's got to be some peace. And for them, the way they were behaving to disrupt every committee, disrupt the House floor how can we get to the answers of what are we going to do about gun violence? What are we going to do about guns and cars? What are we going to do about red flag law? The conversation can't happen because they're drowning out and sucking all the air out of the room. So I would just push back on you saying we can't get there if they won't let us. And thank you for letting me speak with you. God bless you.
Representative, I know you got a long drive home. One final question for you. All right. Well, Chairman Faison has left us.
And it's so important that we recognize this for what it is and that we see this for what it is, because if we do not, then we will not take the proper actions to stop it.
And what, do you think what she's saying is just a bunch of hyperbole, a bunch of fear-mongering like the right wing does with literally everything down to wolf attacks in Colorado? We want to find solutions to these problems that we're having in the United States of America, but we're not going to find solutions if we're always having obstructions from the right wing for every solution possible, because there's always pork in the mail or whatever other excuse they want to add to it. It is a fact that the Republican Party, especially in the Midwest states and the red states, are deathly afraid of the progressive movement happening in the United States of America. This is proof right here, just this week, of state houses, red state houses, afraid of the progressive movement. And this is just an example of how far they're willing to go to put a stop to it.
Dane County cast more ballots in the race for the Supreme Court than the largest county in the state, Milwaukee County. And in Dane County, 82% of those votes went for the radical. And so unless we turn young people around, and it's not as simple as one campaign ad or some sort of a coalition, this is years of liberal indoctrination coming home to roost, and we've got to turn it around if we're going to win again.
What do you attribute it, boy? I know you say the doctrinization of the left wing, but is it teachers' unions? Is it the abortion issue? What are you pointing to?
Well, it's all the above, and I can't blame a lot of this generation because all they've heard radical ideas on climate change, on defunding the police, on abortion, on all these sorts of other issues. And so they've never heard the opposing viewpoint. And so if that's all they hear in college and high school, on social media and culture, you can see why they've gone so lockstep in that regard. But we've got to start long before an election. And that's why we're doing the work we're doing at Young America's Foundation. We've got to get into the classroom, get into the college campus, and make a difference.
All those radical ideas like climate change and abortion. The reason why all these kids are so radical is they've been indoctrinated. They've been indoctrinated with the idea that women could have a choice over their own bodies. Yeah, see, if they can't see opposing viewpoints, here we go with the opposing viewpoints for everything. Yes, there's always an opposing viewpoint. It doesn't mean that opposing viewpoint is right. You guys are trying to put it out there like each person has their reasons and they need to be able to have their reasons without judgment. And it's like, no. Hitler doesn't deserve respect because his beliefs were his beliefs. So here in a nutshell is just how afraid the red states are of the progressive movement and how far they're willing to go to put a stop to it, like expelling Democratic members of the legislature, like gerrymandering that looks like some kind of weird abstract painting rather than a voting map that it is. The voter suppression in these red states is real, and the reason why they're doing it is because they're so afraid of losing. They're saying it right here. They're saying it openly. We are going to lose if you look at the numbers, and they're putting all the blame on leftist indoctrination. Really. Or it's just logical and critical thinking.